a string of gunshots, just crack, 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 crack. Clinging and hanging from it, pulls himself up, looks, pulls himself up, disappears into the attic. I quickly ran out to the kitchen and hit brew. Transmission that Fred makes over the radio that I recall is that a shot had been fired. And you can hear them buzzing like bees, like way up in the sky, like it was close. And so this is days before drones. We didn't have cameras on sticks. We didn't have pole cams. We didn't have any of that junk. We might have had a mirror, which would have been useless, and a couple of commanders, doing commander things. The driver had grabbed the rifle, put it in his mouth, and taken his life. And he was clearly deceased. Hey, welcome back. Or welcome for the first time, I don't know. If you watched the first couple episodes, I really appreciate it. If you subscribe to the channel, I really appreciate that too. I used to think it was sort of silly when people would say, subscribe to my channel in their videos, but now I kind of get it. So yeah, for real, I appreciate that. I've got some feedback on audio quality, video quality, stuff I can do to improve my speech or my speaking. And so I appreciate that too. So looking to do something here, make this channel better, tell some stories. And so I really appreciate the feedback. Today, I'm going to dive into what the connection coffee has to the channel, why it's in the backdrop, why it's in the channel name, and sort of what the connection is. It is a little bit of a silly thing that I'm known for. I mentioned it before, like, oh, he's the guy who's always got a cup of coffee, or whatever. And the truth is, I often or always have a cup of coffee in my hand as I'm strolling the halls of my police agency, or while I'm driving around in the cop car. If you're going to meet me in public to get together, it's going to be for coffee. One of my things I do every week is sort of a standing appointment with one of the guys I work with. We have coffee, we talk shop. Sometimes we talk about the kids, but often it's just a place where the two of us can sit and drink coffee. And so I guess it is my thing. And so today I'm going to tell a story about a time I was drinking a cup of coffee at a really unlikely time when there was incoming gunfire and you just wouldn't have expected it. And so I'm going to tell that story. So in order to tell this story, the first thing I have to do is introduce you to a guy and a piece of equipment, just so that everybody's on the same understanding of what we're talking about here. So the guy I'm going to introduce is Deputy Fred. I'm going to call him because his name's Fred, so I'll refer to him as Fred. He's now Sergeant Fred. And without embarrassing Sergeant Fred too much, although he may never watch this, but his friends might, Deputy Fred is one of the absolute most professional police officers I've ever met in my whole career. I don't want him to take this the wrong way, but he was an old cop when I was a new cop. And I'm not saying he was an old man, but like when I was a new cop, this was a mentor of mine, someone I would look up to. He worked for a neighboring jurisdiction, but I interacted with him often. Because of the remoteness of the jurisdiction I worked in at the north end of the county where he was a sheriff's deputy, we worked together a lot. I just came to respect him a great deal, thought a lot of the way he did cop work, the way he treated people, and he's just a solid dude. If you know him and you know who I'm talking about, you know him right. He's now, like I mentioned, maybe Sergeant Fred, and that's a long time coming. So I won't go any more into that right now. And the story I'm actually going to tell to introduce him is actually his story. It's not my story. I'm just a character in it. And so I'm going to tell that in just a second. But before I do, I want to explain what a dump pouch is, because later in a story, I'm going to use the term dump pouch. And if you don't know what a dump pouch is, then that might not make a lot of sense. And so a dump pouch, for those of you who don't know, because I don't know who the audience is. The audience could be any variety of people. So in my industry, a dump pouch is a small nylon pocket. It's actually kind of a big pocket, depending on the size, that goes on your belt. It's on my duty rig. It was opposite of my firearm. I'm left-handed, so it was on my right side. And it's like a tactical garbage can. It's a place where you could drop any number of things. If you were in training, it was a place you could carry like extra ammo, or where when you pick up your mags, you could throw your mags. If you were on a mission, you could pick up flashbang bodies after a mission and throw them in there to collect them for whatever reason. You could dump anything you can imagine that you don't want in your hands, but you can't dump, you would put in a dump pouch. It's place to catch junk. And so I don't know who invented the dump pouch, but whoever you are, I hope you're a millionaire, because before dump pouches, we just were like trying to shove junk in our pockets or shove it in our vests or whatever. I don't know. It seems obvious. I wish I had invented it. I got an example of one to show you. It's the actual dump pouch from the story I'm going to tell. It's a Maxpedition dump pouch. They're not like a sponsor or anything because I don't have sponsors, but it is a piece of equipment I like, and it's a high quality dump pouch. And so here's my duty rig from back then. I've modified it to meet my current assignment now, so it looked slightly different back then, but the holster and the dump pouch are in the same place. So here it is. So this is my duty rig. I don't wear it every day just for, stuff I need this belt for. But this is my dump pouch. It's green because the SWAT uniforms were green. And this is a dump pouch. It's like right now it has Apple earpods in it. Like, I know why they're in there because they were in my hand and I needed to dump them during a thing I was just doing it. So, like, who even has those anymore? They have a wire. Anyways, this is the duty rig I was wearing that day of the story that I'll tell. This is a dump pouch. That's important. Pay attention to that. So now you know what a dump pouch is. Maybe you did already. Hopefully I didn't insult you. And now you know Deputy Fred is a person that I considered a mentor, who I looked up to, an absolute solid law enforcement officer. So here's the story. So I got hired on August 1st. My academy start date was sometime in September. And back then, like now, the agency had to figure out something to do with me after I got hired before I went to the basic academy. In this state, your police agency sponsors you, sends you to the basic academy. You're a paid employee while you're there. And so what my agency, like agencies even still today, did was I spent a combination of different trainings that I did, orientation things, and then a lot of riding around in a cop car, gaining experience, but really just riding around in a cop car, waiting to go to the academy. And so that's what I was doing one day before I left for the academy when I first met Fred. So this is Fred's story. It's not mine. I'm going to get some of the details wrong, but you'll get the gist of it from my memory. So I'm riding around in a cop car with an experienced police officer in my jurisdiction, and we hear Deputy Fred call out a traffic stop. The officer I'm with says, "Hey, that's about a mile out of town." What he's doing is he's telling me that's a mile out of town. He's introducing me to situational awareness. What he's doing is he's alerting me, "Hey, that's about a mile out of town. We're his nearest cover. We need to be listening to him. We need to be aware of our surroundings." He's doing all of those things for me in the comment of, "Hey, that's about a mile out of town." So I become aware that that's a mile out of town. I'm listening to this traffic stop, and the officer I'm with turns the direction we're patrolling kind of in that direction. We say drifting that way, so to speak. And so we are available. We're not being asked for, but we're drifting that way. We're his nearest cover. And so this is all an introduction to situational awareness. And so as we're drifting that way, Deputy Fred comes out over the radio and he alerts everyone that he has observed a firearm in the vehicle. What I know now that I didn't know at the time as I'm heading that direction is that when he went up on the traffic stop, he observed a hunting rifle in the vehicle. This is not an uncommon occurrence. The county surrounding the jurisdiction I worked in is very rural. Hunting's very common. Possession of a hunting rifle, not unusual. So he alerts over the radio that there's a firearm visible in the vehicle. So what I now know is he addressed the firearm to the occupant, said, keep your hands on the steering wheel, don't touch the firearm, whatever. Like I said, that part of the story is his. I wasn't there for that. What I do know is he's alone. The driver is being compliant, and Deputy Fred pulls back to his vehicle. Rather than get in the driver's seat, Deputy Fred wants to stay standing, stay aware, maintain some sort of tactical advantage. He goes all the way to the trunk of the car, which wasn't a common practice, to get out on the radio and run the driver over the radio for wants and warrant check, things like that, the things you do on a traffic stop. And so we are now definitely heading that way as a cover unit, and the next transmission that Fred makes over the radio that I recall is that a shot had been fired. And so we are about a half a mile away when that call comes out. And so when we roll up on this traffic stop, Deputy Fred is standing at the trunk of the car, eyes fixed at the driver's or at the vehicle in front of his patrol car, and without turning around as we walk up behind him. Now remember, I'm nobody. I'm in plain clothes, probably a polo shirt and a pair of khaki pants or something silly, and I'm just an observer. And so the officer I'm with walks up. Deputy Fred, without turning around, says, "I think he shot himself." So, I'm doing my best to look. Those two officers, Deputy Fred and the officer I'm with, they make a tactical approach on the vehicle. You could see the silhouette of the driver from back where we were, so they make a tactical approach on the vehicle. And sure enough, the driver had grabbed the rifle, put it in his mouth, and taken his life. And he was clearly deceased. And I won't give any more details about that in case anyone happens to watch this that remembers this. But it was a terrible tragedy. I don't know what was going on with this fellow's life, but terrible tragedy. This is the day I met Fred. When I walk up on this, a shot has gone out. He's at the back of his car. He's dead-eye focused on the car, an absolute professional. This is the day I met Fred, the day before I left to the police academy. So, of course, I go off to the police academy. I get my training. I come back. I have field training. So now months have passed, and I'm out patrolling on my own. And I'm now 21 years old, and I'm a police officer doing cop stuff. And one thing is about being 21 and being a police officer, a brand new police officer, is when you are 21, you are like growing up as a person. At the same time, you were growing up as a police officer. And so this is a formative time in your life. And so you're learning a lot. And cop work, like lots of jobs, but what I know is cop work is, it's not just dangerous. It's an intellectual thing. There's a lot of thinking involved. There's a lot of quick decision making involved, and all of this is happening while you're also like your brain's still forming. And so it's looking back, I'm glad it worked out the way it did. I had like I've said before, I had a blessed career that a lot of things have to go your way, and I'm thankful for how it all turned out. But being 21 and being a cop, that's tough. Your 20s, right? So a little while into being a police officer, maybe years, I don't really remember, but sometime into being a police officer, I'm on a call with Deputy Fred, and I like to tease him about this story still to this day. And again, it could have been 10 years ago. No, it wasn't 10 years ago. It was either 15 to 20 years ago. I'm on a call with Fred, and we are at a house, and why we were there is not important, but we are inside the house. We have many people detained, and there are other police officers around, and we have information that a suspect is in the attic. The attic access is above us in a 9-ish foot ceiling. The attic access, we can see it. We've jimmied it open with a broom or some long stick of some kind. We have no ladder. And there's this guy who's known to be armed, and we believe best intel is that he's in the roof or in the attic. And so this is days before drones. We didn't have cameras on sticks. We didn't have pole cams. We didn't have any of that junk. We might have had a mirror, which would have been useless, and we wouldn't have had it at the scene. And so someone needed to stick their head in that hole, usually on a ladder, and see if anyone was in the attic. And so with a flashlight. And so no access to a ladder. What we decided to do, and by we, I mean Fred, he, from a standing position in the area below the opening, leaps, and he'll deny this, but it's the absolute truth. It is what happens. He leaps, grabs the attic access 9 feet in the air, clinging and hanging from it, pulls himself up, looks, pulls himself up, disappears into the attic. And now he's got a flashlight and he's looking around in the attic. He finds this guy we're looking for hiding up there, and somehow or another we got him down. But it was a sight to behold to see this veteran police officer in his full duty gear leap in the air, grab the attic access, pull himself up, and disappear into the attic looking for this, potentially armed fugitive. Say what you want. It was a sight to behold. So this is Fred. This is Deputy Fred, now Sergeant Fred, and at least now, not at the time. And so now you've been introduced to Fred. So flash forward some years later, and I'm on the SWAT team with Deputy Fred, who, when I joined the team, had been on the team for a long time. We are both operators on the team, and one morning, as SWAT calls will, I was at home, I was asleep. The SWAT call comes in, pre-dawn. Pager goes off, which, I mean, it wasn't a real pager. It was a call or a text or some obnoxious alert. But the page goes out for the SWAT team, and we mobilize for a barricaded armed subject. So the SWAT call comes in the middle of the night, or early morning rather, and the way it works is, at the time I was serving in a detective unit, so I had a take-home car. My agency doesn't give take-home cars to everybody, and so detectives have them. So all my SWAT gear's in my car. I get my uniform on, and I have my SWAT gear on, and I go flying down to the scene. So within the call out to being on scene, I'm there relatively quickly. Pause right there. One of the things I like to do back then is, every night before bed, I would set up my coffee pot to brew coffee. And one time, not this call, I figured out that when the SWAT page, and this was just an accident, the SWAT page goes off. Again, this is a different call out. Before I got dressed, I quickly ran out to the kitchen and hit brew. So by the time I had my uniform on, I had a cup of coffee brewed in the coffee pot, threw it in a travel cup. At the time, I had a Camelback coffee cup that was watertight, sealed. It was a really nice cup, kept stuff really hot. And so I learned that on that other call out. So call out comes in for this situation I'm talking about. I run out to the kitchen, hit brew, run back to my bedroom, pull my britches on, put my uniform top on, lace up my boots, and I'm back in the kitchen about the time there's a coffee cup full of coffee in there. So I pour my coffee into my cup, and I run out to the car. So from the time of the call out to being on scene is probably, it's less than 10 minutes. This particular call out was not far from where I lived. It was within 5 minutes code run. And so I'm on scene pretty quick. And so when I get on scene, the SWAT commander from my agency is at the command post. And as I get out of my car and I sling my heavy vest on, and I'm walking towards the command post, which this is early in the command post being created. And so it's just a couple of cars and a couple of commanders, doing commander things. And so as I'm walking up, I'm putting my helmet on. And as I'm buckling my helmet, I get to this commander. And I said, "How far is the scene from the command post?" Or something like that. My question is, how far away to the scene? I don't get the words out of my mouth, and I hear a string of gunshots, just crack, 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 crack. And you can hear them buzzing like bees, like way up in the sky, like it was close. And so as I buckle my helmet and I say, "How close to the command post?" Crack, 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 crack. I said, "Oh, it's close." And the commander, he chuckled at me, gave me my assignment, just as Deputy Fred shows up. So Deputy Fred shows up. He and I are given an assignment together as a two-man element to do containment on one of the rear corners of the house. So we have a piece of armor, and because this was we're not a full-time team, we're being called out and people are responding from different places. We need to get containment in place quickly. Deputy Fred and I are deployed to the scene in armor, just the two of us. So there was already units on the front of the house, and we are deployed to the back of the house. And as I'm getting my assignment and the mission brief, which essentially is this: neighbors in the neighborhood wake up to gunfire coming from the house. Subject inside, all by themselves, is just shooting indiscriminately out of the house. And houses around have been evacuated, and every once in a while, this suspect just fires a couple of rounds through the windows, and they're inside. And so that's basically the mission brief. And we got some intel on who we believe the subject was and what their access to ammunition and firearms was. But that's the brief. And so Deputy Fred and I are sent to one of the rear corners of the house. As I'm getting my briefing, I'm sipping coffee from this cup, which people like to poke fun at me for, like, you had time to brew coffee. And what I like to point out is, no, I had time to prepare for this mission the night before that I never knew was going to happen, so that I had coffee. And so, yeah, forgive me. And so I'm sipping on my cup of coffee as I'm getting my brief. Well, class dismissed, they tell us to head to the armor. As I do that, I drop my coffee in my dump pouch to sling my gloves on, to grab my rifle, to whatever I had to do. I needed my hands free. Floomp, coffee goes in my dump pouch. I don't remember this like being a conscious decision. I wasn't planning to bring my coffee. Listen, I wasn't in a practice of bringing cups of coffee to SWAT scenes with me. It just, was something I would sip on during the briefing, during the drive, and then discard, go do my thing. In this case, I dump it in my dump pouch. So Deputy Fred and I go to our area of containment, and when we get there, we have to drive the piece of armor through some neighboring yard, and then we come up against a fence. Well, we decide that to get best access, we're going to drive through the back fence. It's a wood fence, and we drive the armor through the back fence. And so now we have a good view because we've busted several panels of this wood fence down, and we've made access if we need to go in. We've made access for us to see, and so we're in. And so we do decide, though, because of where the armor is, and this particular piece of armor had limited, it was an older piece of armor. We have a couple pieces of high-end Bearcat armor, but at the time we only had one, and then we had this other piece of armor that was honestly, it was less bulletproof. And so we didn't care to stand behind it as our protection. Although it was bulletproof, there was a corner of a building in the adjacent lot that had good hard cover. And so we decided, A, that we didn't want to be behind the less bulletproof piece of armor, and B, it was kind of a target of opportunity at the back of the house, and we could take cover and concealment at this hard cover just off to the left if you were looking at the house from the armor. So we decided to set up there. One thing about that is only one person from that position could be holding cover with a view of the house. And so intermittently while we were back there, and we would alternate who was watching from our position of cover, intermittently there would be like bursts of gunfire from inside. No idea where it was coming from within the house. It was kicking up dirt in the backyard. A lot of it was aimed at the piece of armor we chose not to sit behind. And, grass and tufts of dirt and debris would fly up in the air, and the suspect was just shooting from inside the house. And so after some amount of time, Fred rolled into the cover position, and I was standing behind him, behind hard cover, no view of the house, just like, I'm ready. Well, I realize that I have my coffee, and I'm not working. I'm not doing anything. I'm waiting for my turn to tap Fred and get back to work. And so I take my coffee out, and I was sipping on this cup of coffee that I had dumped in my dump pouch. And at some point I'm sipping on this cup of coffee, and there's a barrage of gunfire at our piece of armor, and it's right in front of the front bumper. It's kicking up dirt, and it's like, kack, kack, kack. And now listen, I don't want to over dramatize this. Like, this is not like Carentan 1944. Like, we were behind hard cover several feet, 30 feet from where the gunfire is. This is not aimed fire. We are behind hard cover. We are not in real danger where we're at. Someone would have to step out, see us, and engage us directly. So I don't want to over dramatize this, but there is gunfire heading at the armor that we had driven to the scene 20 or 25, 30 feet away, whatever it was. And I'm sipping on coffee as we watch these bullet impacts in the grass. And so Fred is at this angle, kind of like this here. And he goes, "Are you drinking coffee?" And I said, "Well, yeah, like, of course." He gave me a disapproving kind of shake of the head, and we went about our thing. This situation resolves eventually peacefully. This suspect had a lot of access to ammunition. Eventually, through negotiations and whatever, the suspect surrenders peacefully, and we took them into custody. And so This was a situation where I had a cup of coffee handy during an unexpected or unlikely time to enjoy a cup of coffee, and I enjoyed a cup of coffee with Deputy Fred. So the point of the story is just to introduce, just kind of a funny story about coffee, since coffee's in the channel name. It's not an exciting story necessarily, but it is what it is. Some of the hopes we have for the channel in the future is I've started reaching out to people I've worked with over the years. I've got a couple of people lined up that together with them, I have actually entertaining stories that we've told together, just out in the wild. And I think you'll get a kick out of. One of them is someone that I served in detectives with when we were in the major crimes unit together. We worked a really interesting case. He was the primary case officer on this case, and I had an opportunity to assist him all along the way. We have decided we're going to get those records through a public records request so that we can go through that case in like a full debrief. It's a very interesting case, and we're just kind of curious if anyone would be interested in listening to a several part series as we walk through this very complex case about an accused child abuser, an accused child sexual abuser, sex trafficking suspect with a history of similar behavior. There's fires involved. There are multiple victims involved, some co-suspects involved. This is a cool case, and so we're really looking forward to breaking that case down. I have another guy that I work with that is just a very funny storyteller. When he gets going, he's very entertaining. I look forward to interviewing him. I was just talking with some guys from work yesterday and over the last week where they're asking like, "Hey, where's the channel headed?" And I said, one of the things I'd like to do, because I don't know who's watching or what their interests are, but one of the things I've noticed about myself over the years is I often have an opinion about gear. I'm that guy who would buy a piece of gear to try it out, and if I liked it a lot, I would push for, a piece of gear to be adopted by an agency. And I've seen a lot of my own influence on gear decisions made by agencies over the years. I have an opinion about pieces of equipment. And so I would like to dive into some of the gear we're using right now and see if anyone cares what I have to say about equipment. And so that's another direction we're going. With the channel. I have several young people that I know who are interested in a career in law enforcement. I would love to talk with them and talk about how they've prepared for a career in law enforcement as they're going into applying for police work and things like that and testing. In the state we live, you have to be 21 to be a police officer. You can begin applying at 20 and a half years old. And so I know one young person in particular, she's a senior in college this year, and I've known her since she was little. She was a cadet at our police agency. Now she's about to graduate and start testing for cop work. I don't know if she's going to work at the agency I work with, but I would love to have her on the show, kind of talk about what hurdles she's come up against, what she's excited about a career in law enforcement. The career ahead of her is quite a bit different than the career I've had or that guys who started when I started has. The world's different, cop work's different, expectations of the community are different. And so I'm kind of curious about her thoughts on that. I also have a kid of my own who's almost 20, who's considering a career in law enforcement. She's a stud, and I've been encouraging her to continue down that path if it's what she chooses to do. And so she's done something a little bit different than the other young lady I'm talking about. And so I'd love to talk about her career path, the path she's chosen. I think both are legit paths for their own reasons. And so those are the sorts of people I have kind of lined up to come. One way I explained it was it's not going to take long and I'm going to run out of stories to tell. And so before that happens, I'd like to do, body cam breakdowns, case debriefs on in cases I've worked, talk to different people in the industry, review some gear, maybe even talk to some people in the gear industry. I've got a lot of connections in the vendors for different pieces of equipment, things like that. And so that's where I think the channel's headed, and maybe people watch it, maybe they won't. But been getting a lot of good feedback so far. So thanks for watching.